This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. Hurricane Helene has now resulted in more than 215 deaths as of me recording this, and many more people are still missing. And of course, I want to send my prayers to anybody who's affected by this. And of course, we all know, if you've been paying attention to my content over the years, that this is coming for all of us. Unless, of course, we raise awareness about what's really going on and we actually can do something to stop it from happening. And you know what I'm referencing in regards to the climate. No. Not the narrative that they're telling you about the climate. The fact that our government has patented weather modification going back 100 years plus. And now we're seeing the effects of weather modification, which was supposed to be designed, of course, to be used as a weapon in war against other countries. But the reality is that if you haven't been paying attention, the war has been waged around the world. And the war that's been waged is governments versus civilians. And of course, with all of this chaos that's going on now with Hurricane Helene and all the devastation, the main thing the government wants to focus on and push through the news is that there's a lot of misinformation out there. Of course, as people's lives are completely destroyed, as people are dead, as people can't be found, and of course, as people can't feed their own children, the government's main concern is the spread of misinformation. And that's because they don't want you to figure out what's going on. And one of the stories that's out there is about FEMA confiscating donations that are being given to Hurricane Helene victims. The other stories that are out there, and these are being verified because people are recording these things on their phones and putting them up on their TikToks and on their Twitters and on their Instagram accounts and on their YouTube accounts. And they're showing that they're trying to get close to people affected and bring them water, bring them gasoline in case they have a generator, bring them food, bring them baby formula. What's happening when they're trying to do this? Well, FEMA is preventing the civilians from helping one another, because obviously in events like this that actually occur, people start becoming human again. And they start forgetting about all of the division that the government is causing based on politics, which is all done by design, making the left hate the right and the right hate the left. And people start acting like humans again. And people's main priority is to get people food and water. But who's in the way from them doing that? Who is stopping and preventing them from doing that? Well, of course, FEMA is, right? The people who are supposed to be there helping. And they've even put out an alert saying due to disaster efforts, GA aircraft may not land without prior approval because they don't want people flying, if they own helicopters or private jets, anybody who may have money, who may want to help the best they can by getting food and water to people. Well, they don't want you to intervene in this. This is the government's got it from here. And of course, let's start with some of the main points here, okay? Because many people out there who are posting things are saying that they're literally being blocked and they're having items confiscated. So the media has come out and aired some of this, and of course, including the governor, Freemason Bill Lee, talking about misinformation spreading, and the government's got it under control. Because why would the government need the civilians to help one another out? They've got it, and make sure you stick around because I want to show you what they want you to think is going on and what's really actually going on. So let's start with some of their propaganda that they're airing, of course, to continually be able to herd the sheeple into thinking that FEMA's there actually helping, when we all know what FEMA's job is in all of this.
Communities remain cut off because of destroyed roads. Debris is piling up in Douglas Lake. And now we are seeing misinformation spread online.
Federal and state agencies aren't stopping donations, but that fact hasn't stopped a string of false claims online. And 10 News reporter Lauren Lovett joins us now. You went straight to the director of TEMA and the governor for an explanation and their reaction. Lauren.
TEMA's director, Patrick Sheen, says officials are not and have not been taking donations away. Right now, they're helping organizations that are overwhelmed by donations. Sheen says in Cocke County, they're getting too many donations, and now that's affecting how they're able to help and how people can get help. He says these rumors around government officials taking supplies is absolutely untrue. When we spoke to Governor Bill Lee today, he agreed.
Be very cautious about misinformation. The government is not taking resources. If it doesn't seem to make sense, It's probably not happening.
TEMA had asked people to hold off on donating items that have not been requested. That was in order to locate and rescue over 100 Tennesseans that were missing. Sheen says the volunteer spirit is great, but people will continue to need help. Right now, donors need to listen to leaders.
Don't just think about today when it's easy to think about because it's front and center. Find the time to help them 6 months from now and 1 year from now as well, because they're still going to be suffering. They're still going to be heartbroken of the loss they've faced, and they're still going to be trying to rebuild as they get on with their lives, and they'll need help then.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, as the cleanup and the recovery efforts continue across our area, patience is understandably running thin for some people who are facing a very uncertain future.
And ABC Action News reporter Michael Paluska is on Treasure Island as people are pleading for something to be done, and now.
I'm Michael Paluska here at Sunset Beach, and we just talked to a gentleman who is practically irate because he's been going in and out of this area. It's a long walk down through these dunes, but no one's being let in that lives here. Just contractors and FEMA and police. And look, you can see these guys are carrying gallons of gasoline. People are trying to lug their ice in. There's people carrying their children. And he was extremely angry that they said, FEMA's in control, we can't do anything. But all these items that they're trying to get in and out, like ice, food, check on their properties, take out valuables because of looters, they got to walk it in and out. So this was him trying to get answers from FEMA just a few minutes ago.
You're going to send it to the right people so that they can help the necessary residents. So you can help the residents here. You are not helping the residents. Okay, but why did you stop it 3 days ago when the people need help now?
And another resident we spoke to who's been shuttling things back and forth on her bike also told us she feels as though this area, Sunset Beach, Treasure Island, has been abandoned. What's your message for the state and for the federal government? He wants
Get down here and help us.
So that's a main priority, right? Misinformation, alerts being put out, and people are very upset about what's happening out there. So the government wants to make sure that you know and you think that FEMA is actually helping. But what they're really doing is stopping trucks from coming in with supplies. They're stopping helicopters from people who actually have helicopters, or agencies or companies that have helicopters are trying to use it for good to bring in goods to people out there who may need it, things like baby formula. And FEMA is saying, look, you can't get in here because we've got it under control. That's the only excuse that they actually give. And this is where they start trying to hijack the narrative. So it's important to pay attention to this, okay? So Mayorkas, this guy is just, I mean, he's one of the absolute worst. But remember, they've perfectly selected these actors and put them in these roles because these people really could ignite a fire under you when you see these people operate, right? Biden has done a great job. Trump has done a great job. This is another guy who is playing the role perfectly because this guy is doing everything he possibly can to be completely incompetent. In fact, to completely commit the act of treason while still being in power. So Mayorkas has come out and he's warning that FEMA is lacking funding. So all of this tax money that we spend, right, they're gaslighting people and saying, well, FEMA doesn't have funds because we're giving our tax money away to other countries, right? So this is the narrative that they want to keep you stuck inside of. They continually want conservatives to think that all of our tax money is going to migrants and illegal aliens, right? But the truth of the matter is that FEMA, the funding that goes into FEMA is not for migrants. It is not for immigrants. That is a gaslighting tactic. What FEMA is doing, if you're not paying attention, our tax money is going to FEMA, and FEMA is using our tax money to buy and destroy any homes that are in these areas. This is literally FEMA using our tax money, going into places like this, and making sure that people do not stay there and do not attempt to rebuild. This is what they just did in Lahaina. This is what they're doing in all of these disaster zones. They're going in there, and they're making sure that the people who say you survived it, say your house had somewhat of damage, but they want you out of those areas anyway. So the couple houses up the road may be completely demolished. Your house may have stood, and you may say, well, I'm so glad my house is still standing. Well, it doesn't matter. FEMA is coming in, and they're going to tell you that your house is unlivable, that the area is unlivable, and they're going to buy you out if you survive. They're also going into zones outside of these areas and buying people out for double the property value. And they even tried to put propaganda out there this year that I covered where they were trying to explain why the United States government is buying and destroying homes. So just to get this straight, FEMA is funded by our tax money, and FEMA is not housing migrants. FEMA is being used to herd people, and I'll show you eventually what life looks like with FEMA. But let's start with this piece. Take your mind off of the narrative that they want out there, where they're saying FEMA's broke because they're housing migrants, because they want to keep you stuck in the left and right. They want you stuck in this whole, well, we could change everything when we go and vote. But really what FEMA's doing is buying people's homes with our money. They're buying people out, and they're moving people out of certain areas. They are herding humans like cattle. They're drilling us with weather, and they're moving people out of these locations. This is what FEMA has been doing with your tax money.
The U.S. government is buying up and then destroying American homes like this one. Some homeowners in floodplains may voluntarily sell their doomed properties to the government.
Since 1989, FEMA has funded something on the order of 45 to 50,000 home buyouts.
FEMA is estimated to have spent somewhere around $4 billion on the project so far. But that's just a fraction of the total amount spent on buyouts, since there are programs outside of FEMA.
But not everyone is convinced buyouts are a good idea.
It's a bit of a mixed bag. I think in some cases they're successful and in some cases they're not.
Any person that is moved out of harm's way is a positive move forward, provided that they're given appropriate resources to move and to start their lives anew somewhere else.
Because there's so much variation, sometimes buyouts are heartbreaking and sometimes they're a celebration.
Kind of tugs at my heart a little bit. I was there for 17 years. I'm like, they're going to tear this house that I was living in down. I miss the neighborhood, but I'm happy in this location. It's not in a flood zone.
Buying up homes and demolishing them seems pretty counterintuitive to solving the housing crisis. The U.S. is still short up to 7.2 million homes.
We're talking about a crisis of affordability in housing across the country, combined with a crisis of the climate change's effects. How do we ensure that we provide for our population while making sure that they're not in harm's way?
So do floodplain buyouts help or hurt American homeowners? And can the U.S. afford to bail out communities?
The general way that floodplain buyouts work is that a disaster occurs, there's damage done to people's homes, the community, the local government, they decide that it might make sense to offer buyouts to residents in those damaged areas. Most often, the local government and the state then request funding from the federal government. They receive the funding, they make an offer to purchase a home from someone who has a damaged home. That homeowner decides whether or not to sell. If they sell, they relocate somewhere else. The government owns the property. They demolish the home and create open space. And there are almost infinite variations at every single one of those stages I just described, but that's the really general process.
These homes are often located in the floodplain or an area that is deemed likely to flood.
One of the most successful buyout programs has been in the area near Charlotte, North Carolina, where there's almost 20,000 acres of floodplain. Over 475 homes have been purchased since 1999, relocating over 785 families and businesses outside of the floodplain.
My name is Andrea Jones. I'm 59 years old and I work for a bank. So I've been in the banking industry for 36 years now. And I moved here to start that job and I stayed. Didn't have a reason to move back to South Carolina until now. I moved with the buyout program in May of 2023, so 10 months now, 11 months now. I do consider myself a member of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg community because I still work there, and that's where I do the majority of my shopping. My doctors are still there. I didn't move any of that because I'm not that far away. So I am still a member of the community. I just don't live there anymore.
The county says $90.5 million have been invested from federal, state, local, and other sources, and claims it has avoided $40.9 million in losses. Some of the largest programs that support floodplain buyouts are FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant and 3 programs from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD.
They all come with different requirements and different provisions.
For example, from FEMA, the flood buyouts tend to occur for severe repetitive loss properties, so places that have gone through several floods. For HUD, for example, if a state chooses after a disaster to use its funds to allow for buyouts, then those homes that went through the flood are eligible.
On average, federal buyouts can take 2 to 5 years, though 80% of FEMA acquisitions are approved in less than 2 years.
And that's a long time to wait if your home has mud in it and you're trying to figure out whether to rebuild or not.
And it usually is predicated on which program is funding the buyout.
Some buyouts have happened in as little as 3 or 4 months, especially when the funding comes from the state or local level instead of the federal.
It was a letter sent through the mail, and it was sent to all of the homeowners on the street. Within 3 years of me being in the house was the first time I experienced the heavy flooding. It came up to my mailbox. You could not see the street. You could not see the beginning of my driveway. A couple of years later, the street flooded again. Because of the pandemic, finally got everything completed in December of 2022. Signed my contract for them to purchase my house in January of 2023, and then we had to start the appraisal process. Once they did the appraisal, I did a second appraisal. They allow you to get your own. The one thing I didn't like about that was my appraisal had to include the flood zone. And I thought because my house was not in a flood zone when I purchased it that I didn't have to do that, but they said, yes, I do. Once I found a home, the process was easy. I told them when I could move, and we scheduled the closing. So the home that I was in, we closed on a Thursday, and then I closed on this home the very next day.
Andrea said some of her neighbors took the buyout, but others didn't, especially those who didn't have a mortgage.
The estimates of homes in the United States who are at risk of being flooded ranges from somewhere to between 4 and 41 million by 2100. That's a big margin of error, but regardless, if we've spent the last 30 years buying out 45 to 50,000 homes, and in the next 80 years we need to do 4 million, we're nowhere near the scale that would be required.
The FEMA grants are funded through a cost share, where the federal government provides 75% of the money and the remaining 25% comes from a different agency, the state or local government, or the homeowner. In some instances, the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law can cover 90% of the buyout with federal funds. The non-federal funds are generated straight from the tax revenue or
income tax revenue. Sometimes they're coming from a sales tax. There's a couple communities who put in a sales tax specifically for this issue. Sometimes it's a bond measure. Sometimes it's volunteering the fire department's time, for example, to demolish some of these bought out homes, or it's other voluntary donations in kind of time or services or others that are meeting those requirements.
Some communities may not have the funds to support their part of a plan like this and worry the buyouts could chip away at their already stretched tax base.
Downtownship's mayor says without its Bayside sections, the rural community's already small tax base would be decimated.
We're not going to have any ratables or revenue left, and I don't see anything else except bankruptcy.
We're a hurting community in terms of we are built out. We're 2 square miles, and every home we knock down, we lose the tax revenues, and there's nothing to replace it.
Individual homeowners may also be concerned about how much money they'll be able to make in the sale.
The water was up to here.
The idea is that the government will buy the home for the same value that someone could have sold their home on the private market for a private sale.
But that doesn't mean every homeowner will be happy with their buyout offer.
Right now, the way the market is, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be to our advantage.
How much would you lose?
At least $100,000.
It's not just our home, it's our entire life. It's everything that we've worked for and built up to this point that we're gambling with.
You're typically going to run into a situation in which the value of the buyout offer is not going to match what it's reasonably going to cost for the recipient to relocate to a higher, drier, safer location outside of the floodplain.
That could be because the average cost of a house in the U.S. has jumped 3.5% from 2022 to 2023.
The house originally sold for $135,000. That was back in 2006. The appraised value was $325,000. So we paid off the remainder of my mortgage. The new home was $437,000. Obviously, home values gone up. I did buy a nicer home than what I was in. If I'm going to move, I need to get what I want. This house is 3 bedrooms, 2 baths as well, but there is also a half bath. Even though I put a good bit of money down on this house, my mortgage still doubled. I had a 3.62 mortgage interest rate. It went up more than 2 points. I have a 5.99% interest rate now. And then the amount of the house, it was $206,000 for the mortgage, whereas then when I originally bought the other house was $135,000.
The actual execution of the buyout work is done by the state or local government.
And so those local governments can make lots of decisions that are appropriate for their context. How many homes they want to make offers to, how much additional assistance they want to make to help people relocate afterwards, how they use the land after it's purchased, and on and on.
Larger buyout programs can offer additional incentives for the homeowner. For example, the Blue Acres program in New Jersey is able to negotiate lower mortgage rates for buyout recipients when they look to relocate. If a homeowner still holds a mortgage, the balance will be paid off to the bank directly. The land is then deeded to the local government with restrictions on how it can be used.
You can't go in and redevelop. There's a few very, very small exceptions, like if you made a community garden or a park, you can put a restroom, but that's basically it. Like that's the level of reconstruction you could do.
Ideally, the land is maintained as some sort of public benefit, like a park or a swale, which is a depression in the land that can collect floodwaters to protect the other homes in the neighborhood. Some municipalities even create wildlife corridors. Others won't have the funds to maintain or transform the land, and it simply remains a vacant lot.
So this is the horror story we're now living in, right? Everybody's seen all the coffins that FEMA has accumulated and lined up over the years, all obviously pre-planned for events like this to occur. They can foo-foo this and tell everybody out there, well, that's what their job is. FEMA's supposed to come into these disaster zones and take care of business, right? Of course, they have to take care of business by not allowing other civilians to get involved and help each other out, because they have to stop that, because that's not what the goal of what FEMA's actually doing is. And if you haven't paid attention to what FEMA really is, you know those camps you were taught about throughout your programming in the school systems, where they had to program you into thinking that certain people were victims or actually the same people who are responsible for everything that's going on in the world? Remember all the programming we saw these camps? Well, isn't it crazy that FEMA is responsible for putting all these camps in place after, of course, the government themselves wipes out certain areas? So they wipe out Lahaina, and FEMA goes there, and instead of helping people rebuild, they say, well, this is a disaster zone. You can't come near any of this land. But look, we set up housing for you. It all looks identical. We even named the roads little dystopian names so that you feel like you're living in Pleasantville. And of course, people are left with no choice. They get their homes wiped out, and they have nowhere to go. But FEMA comes in and builds these little prisons for them and tells them it's temporary housing. But does that end up being temporary housing? Well, of course not, because you never hear on the news after the fact that the people who got wiped out of their homes were never able to go back there and rebuild, that they're now living permanently in these camps. And we're supposed to smile as they put us in these FEMA prisons. Look at this.
I'm Giacomo Luca in Gridley. It's a project 2.5 months in the making, but now FEMA is putting the finishing touches on a community for 400 families that will house campfire survivors. FEMA crews have cleared the 72-acre site, running underground electric, sewer, water, and paved roads in a project costing in the tens of millions, building essentially an entire neighborhood in just 2.5 months. Survivors will live in these 1 to 4 bedroom housing units that look like this. 300 have already been placed. They'll come fully furnished and will look similar to this inside. FEMA's project manager says crews have exceeded expectations because they know just how important it is.
They're not walking between trailers. They're running from trailer to trailer to jump on the next project. You know, and that to me is pretty amazing to watch that kind of enthusiasm to help get the project finished on that pace.
For the past 8 months, we've told you stories of those who have lost their homes in the wildfire and have since been living in hotels, shelters, or with family and friends. The first family will move in this afternoon and a majority over the rest of this weekend. Meanwhile, crews are ready to bring in the final 100 units to complete this project.
Well, Hurricane Laura is what happened to my house. It tore my whole roof off, or it looks like it did, and windows busted out, and water standing in my house got all wet. It's just horrible. For all my appliances, furniture, everything was soaked, so it was no good. So I called FEMA to see if they could help me. And they did. They brought me a trailer. I was living from house to house, kinfolk to kinfolk to kinfolk, or friend to friend to friend, jumping from house to house, and I was so glad to get in there. And once I got FEMA on the phone, I asked them, could I put the trailer on my property? Because I wanted to be home. There's no place like home. So they did. They agreed to that, and they put the FEMA trailer right here on my property. I'm home. All my family lives around here. My friends live here. It's very convenient. And I'm just thankful to FEMA for allowing me to put it on my property. These people, FEMA, they are a blessing. They're giving me a home right now to live in, and it is such a blessing to me. I'm glad to be home, and FEMA made that possible. They really did.
I'm here to license in a couple who, by their not to their own fault, have been received damage. FEMA has partnered up with Mosswood Estates. Mosswood Estates have, I want to say, about 300 units.
We was hit with the first storm and my trailer was very damaged. We'd lived there for a long time and we evacuated to Mississippi.
Me, my two boys, and my grandson lived in a 4-bedroom trailer, and Hurricane Laura happened and we left town.
Other than that, we've been pretty much homeless, sleeping place to place. I slept in my car for about a month.
People checked out my trailer and said it had a big hole, and they said you couldn't even walk in it. It was too dangerous. You'd fall through the floor. Just while we were in Dallas, we had to switch motels like 3 times. Then turned around and they finally come to us and told us we were going back to Louisiana. It's okay. And they put us in New Orleans.
We had no idea what we was gonna do. We had no other choices. We had nowhere to turn.
And then yesterday, I called and said they had a home for me.
I am beyond thankful. This is really helping a lot. We didn't know what we was gonna do.
I thank FEMA. I really do, because I just want to come home. I really do.
We had no other choices. We had nowhere to turn.
So that's the horror that's really happening in the world, right? The government, who has the ability to modify weather, is using weather to destroy people's homes, to kill people, to wipe people out of areas, and then herd people into zones that they want to herd them into, which eventually will be smart cities and freedom cities that they'll force people to live in. These areas, of course, are filled with resources, a lot of them that they're wiping out, and they're taking the resources. They're also going into these areas and deliberately going after people who are not toting the company line. In other words, people, like I've warned about, people in Texas and Florida, they chose Florida, which has always been a flip state, to become a conservative safe haven by design. Now, people in the left-right paradigm don't have a clue about what's going on because they think that their vote actually counts. But obviously, people with conservative mindsets understand how wicked globalism is and global communism is, and the majority of them are Christians. So what I'm trying to do is pull them out of the left-right paradigm, because guess what? This criminal organization known as your government, nobody that you vote for is, you think they do all this stuff and then your vote actually counts? What they do is they want you to think your vote counts because they keep you under control. They keep you thinking that you still could do something about it, but what you could do is vote, because they don't want a revolution to occur. While they're doing this to people with weaponized weather, by doing all the other things that they're doing, including trying to poison everybody and take people's jobs away who refuse to comply and poison themselves. The governments have gone completely rogue. But the vote is so important because it's your consent. You're consenting to all of this occurring. And it's also keeping you from actually doing something about what they're doing to you, because there's more of us than them. So they need to keep you trapped inside of the left-right paradigm. So they're herding all these people to these states. They're hitting them with weaponized weather. FEMA's coming in, and of course, they're not doing anything that they claim to do. People go, well, FEMA's there. Maybe they gave somebody a bottle of water. Highly doubtful. But if you go there and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're from out of state or you survived the storm and you want to go there and help, guess what? You're not allowed to help. Let the experts handle it from here, right? That's what you're told. Let the government handle it from here. We don't need your help, even though they do need your help, but they don't want to actually help. That's not what the goal of this is. It's to get everybody out of these zones, make sure nobody's staying in these areas because they're not allowed to. Anybody who survived, their home survived, they're taking out of there and saying it's too dangerous for them to stay. They'll make up stories about, well, the ground might cave in. There could be an electrical fire in your home. We got to get you out of here now. And it's only temporary, of course. And then they never return to these areas, right? They end up in those camps that look a lot like those camps that we were told about growing up, that people were locked inside of. Just the difference is that they've created this dystopian hell where you're supposed to smile when FEMA shows up and puts you in these homes. And you're supposed to be grateful that they're even giving you a home to live in. And then they have everybody just distracted by the notion that FEMA's broke all of a sudden. With the amount of tax money that we all spend, FEMA's completely broke, right? And this just gaslights people more and more into wanting to go consent with their vote because they're thinking to themselves, we can't have this. Trump will stop this. All of our tax money's going to Ukraine. All these other people but our own, right? And the government, of course, deliberately comes out on national television and tells you, well, we're giving $700 to everybody. Right? And how irate do all of the civilians get? Very irate. But they don't realize that they're baiting them. They don't even have to tell you how much money they're giving. Kamala Harris comes out and says we're giving $700 to each victim. Right? Same thing we heard in Maui. This gets people irate. This gets people to do what? Well, nothing. Nothing. It gets them to go and vote. And that prevents a revolution from actually occurring. And a revolution does not have to be anything violent. I'm not calling for violence. I've never called for violence. The revolution is not participating. The revolution is taking steps backwards with everything that they've tried to normalize and get you on board with, which mainly means technology, because all of their control comes through technology, comes through the digital ID, which is why they're hell-bent on pushing it now. It comes with your consent to do all these things on the internet where they have control over all of it, where they make you think that you're freely doing these things when they're listening and spying and reading emails and getting inside of your mind so they know what you're thinking at all times, because the internet has just become literally a hive mind. But it's also become a consciousness in a sense, because everything that you put out to the world, they're paying attention to. And they want to make sure that everybody stays stuck in this left-right bubble. The illusion is that the government is really against people who are voting for Donald Trump. That's not the illusion. They're against people like me and you who listen to this channel. People who are not falling for their propaganda, who are not buying into the left-right, who know that they're getting worked and played. They want you to stay in the program. So anybody out there that's tweeting about Trump, they're like, oh, I'm dangerous. I'm tweeting positive Trump stuff. I'm tweeting that Trump's going to come in and he's going to fix FEMA and the FBI and the CIA. That's fine by them. That's the narrative they want you to think. They want you to think that this all gets solved with a vote. And then, of course, when the vote comes, they're going to tell you that the election was rigged because they're going to put some propaganda out there about some county with dead voters or illegal immigrants voting. And then they can push the digital ID on you and convince conservatives that the digital ID will stop that from happening in the future. That's how this whole machine works. This whole entire machine. It's a corrupt machine. Everybody out there should be able to see it from FEMA. But they don't want to get past the fact that all they have to do is go and vote and they can fix this. Because it's too much for them to actually comprehend that the government has completely turned on the civilians, the conservatives and the Democrats. Events like this you would think would bring people together to get away from political ideologies, and they use these events to continue the divide. All the stories out there that are out there now are about, well, now, FEMA doesn't want to help conservatives. That's what's going on. FEMA doesn't want to help them because they're conservative states, which plays into what I talked about with conservative and Democrat states. It's coming. You can feel it. Do you see that narrative out there? Wait a minute. Conservative states got hit with these storms. They don't tell you about weaponized weather, of course, and they say, well, they got hit with these storms. It's all organic. And why isn't the government helping the conservatives out? Those are the narratives that they want in place, not the narrative, which you'll never hear from the alt-right media, of weaponized weather, how this is deliberate and strategic. These are deliberate hits, direct hits. And then how, of course, eventually the plan is to get conservatives to live in conservative states and Democrats to sit in Democrat states. And the conservatives are going to continue to get hit with this until they realize that geoengineering and weaponized weather is a real thing. It's silent weapons for quiet wars. And there's one going on right now And they want you to think that the war going on is between you and your Democrat neighbor up the road or your Republican neighbor down the street. That's the war they want you to think that's going on, this civil war. But they're the ones who have manufactured this order out of chaos. They are using weather against the civilians. They don't want you to know it, and the alt-right media will gatekeep for it. That's why when stories like this come out about FEMA, it still plays into the left-right, right? FEMA's not letting people get in there with goods because FEMA hates conservative states, and these are red states. That's it. That's where the narrative stops. And then they go, well, FEMA doesn't have any money because they're giving it to illegals, and they feed it, feed it, feed it. Instead of going, you know what? Let's stop feeding this machine. As civilians, let's stop participating in their game. Let's pull ourselves out of it. Because if you pull yourselves out, they take their foot off the pedal because they don't want to lose control. If they see everybody stops buying this, they'll say, all right, well, we don't want to lose total control. We don't want these people to completely pull away and disband from us. So we'll pull our foot off the pedal a little bit. We'll do a little bit less. Maybe we'll push the digital ID back. Maybe we'll push, the climate initiative back. We'll just take our foot off a little bit. Because if we lose full control of the people, we lose all of it. Because there's way more civilians than there are corrupt politicians and satanic corporations and all these people in secret societies. We outnumber them. But you got to get yourself out of the game. And they're playing games. Okay, and what people need to know about the FEMA money is not that the FEMA money is housing immigrants. The FEMA money is being used for land grabs to buy people out of these zones. That's what our tax money is going for. We're literally buying property. Our tax money is buying property. And it's not buying property for me and you to live in. It's buying property for the government to seize so that they could continue to move you because they look at you like cattle. They look at all of us like sheep on a farm, and they're the herders, and they're moving us where they want to move us strategically. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. Prayers for everybody affected. Share this video with others. And God bless all of you, as always, and your families.